St. George, the classic warrior saint with cool iconography depicting his badassery. Of course, the deed most associated with him today is the slaying of a dragon, told in traditions all over the world. One could argue where or how George slew the dragon, but none deny that the triumph of the saint over the monster was and still is one of the most popular subjects for those in the Byzantine cultural sphere to depict in media. Like many medieval cultures, the Eastern Romans and their Commonwealth loved their tales of dragonslayers. So today, while Georgia celebrates their George's Day in autumn, I'd love to show you some more dragon stories which circulated in New Rome other than St. George. And yes, in case you didn't know, there are two St. George's Days, one in spring and another in autumn. Every country has different customs on when to celebrate, but for Georgia, it's November 10th on the Julian calendar, which is November 23rd for us Gregorian folks. Anyway, just a fun fact. Let's dive into today's episode of East Roman literature, where we won't be looking at one single work, but several regarding one topic. Book recommendation before we start: The Penguin Book of Dragons. This book is such a treat, and I took 3 stories from it for the video. There is even more material on Byzantine dragons, and of course on many other cultures as well. I'm sure there's something for everyone. So yeah, grab this book if you're a myth nerd like me. Anyway, in this video, I present 5 tales about dragons and dragonslayers from the Eastern Roman Empire, and I'll read you a bit of the primary source for each story. Let's start with these 3 from the Penguin book first, and we begin with the conventional, good old hero versus dragon epic combat like that of St. George. How an Emperor of Trebizond, with the aid of St Eugenios, slew a dragon. This story is also relative to the point we have reached in our narrative of Roman history, as we have now covered the founding of the successor states post-1204, Trebizond being one of them. What I neglected to mention was how the Empire of Trebizond had an official saint, Eugenios of Trebizond, whose cult was exceptionally popular in, you guessed it, Trebizond. The Trapezuntine veneration for St Eugenios further crafted their own identity apart from their fellow Romans in the West, so it was an important affair. This is why the 14th century Bishop of Trebizond, Ioannis Lazaropoulos, found it necessary to write a massive compilation of the legends related to the patron saint of his empire, one of them being the current legend I am about to relate. Sometime in the 13th or 14th century, a dragon terrorized the mountain just east of the city of Trebizond, blocking the flow of goods into and out of the capital, causing much harm to the state. The emperor in the text is suggested to be Alexios II Megas Komnenos by Anthony Caudelas, his translator, so we'll go with that. Anyway, Alexios II was very distressed, and being an energetic and responsible ruler, he sought to end the menace. He was very pious, so of course he went to his patron St Eugenios monastery to prepare for the upcoming showdown. After all the proper praising was done, he asked the saint to help him in battle, and rode forth to meet the dragon. Then comes the fight. I'll read you a small portion of Caudelas' translation to wrap the story up, and just so I don't get into legal trouble for quoting, here's a disclaimer. Any copyrighted material used in this video are for educational purposes only, falling under the definition of fair use. All rights and credits go directly to its rightful owners. Yes, anyway, quote, "The dragon was now spotted, a huge thing breathing fire, as it were. The emperor stood opposed to it, with steely resolve, fully a warrior, fully as if he were breathing fire back against it, brandishing a spear at it and his shining sword. Quickly he dared the dragon to attack him, trusting in God and the martyr. Seeing his opponent act like this, the beast charged him even more eagerly, but in his rush to kill him, the beast was mortally wounded by the emperor, and fell dead. His carcass was a magnificent sight, which had only slightly wailed in on itself. After this feat of valor, the emperor rejoiced and returned to the monastery of Eugenios to repay his gratitude for victory, while his followers carry the dragon's head in their arms, which is still preserved in the palace to this day." Unquote. The text closes with some more praise for both the emperor and St Eugenios. A happy ending. Next up, we have a fun dragon story revolving around the Nicene Arian conflicts of the 4th century. Quick refresher in case you need. Arians were the followers of the Bishop Arius, who claimed that the son is subordinate to the father in contrast to the Orthodox Nicenes, and that led to some intense rivalries in the new Roman Empire. Constantine the Great was Orthodox, but his son Constantius II was Arian, and one day a dragon decided to sit in front of the heretical emperor's treasury, cutting him off from his own wealth. Anybody who tried to remove the dragon ended up dead, and Constantius turned to his Arian priests to pray the dragon away. Guess how that worked out? They all died from the dragon's breath. It was then suggested to Constantius that he should call on Hypatios of Gangra, a staunch Orthodox bishop present at the Council of Nicaea and condemned Arianism. Hypatios came to Constantinople and went into the treasury to face the dragon. He then scared the dragon into submission and doom with his holy words. I quote this part from a life of Hypatios of Gangra, translated by Anthony Caldelas. Quote, "The great Hypatios ordered a great fire to be lit. As the furnace burned, he ventured toward the common destroyer of mankind, grasping a staff in his hand. First, he terrified the dragon with the words of peace, wielding the sign of the cross as if it were a weapon, the greatest guarantee of safety that the Lord bestowed upon his own disciples. For even though animals lack speech, they say, they nevertheless have an implanted sensation of fear of the servants of their Creator. Thus, writhing in pain took hold of the dragon. Lifting his head to the holy man, he then lowered it again, striking the money. Wrapping himself around the face, he contrived a way to hide his own head. He forgot all about killing people and even sensed his own demise. He was ordered to crawl out through the doors and depart from his pile of money. This he did, though he did not want to. The old man rapidly struck the dragon with his staff and caused him to hasten his departure. Thus, aggrieved by the continual blows, the dragon quickly stood up at the insistence of the rod. And thus a majestic miracle took place. The saint emerged slowly from the treasury, dragging his staff on the ground and pulling the dragon along, as if he had been tied to it by a hook. Even so, it instilled a sudden terror in the crowd. The hierarch ordered the dragon to mount the pyre with haste. He went to the place of the furnace, circled around it, and then threw himself onto it. Thus, before all the people, he was consumed by fire." Unquote. Constantius got his treasury back and greatly honored Hypatios, who miraculously got the dragon to throw itself into a fire. But it seems the emperor continued being an Arian despite seeing this. I would also like to mention a very similar story which is less known but just as cool. That of St. Elizabeth the Wonder-Worker Dragonslayer. She lived in 5th century Constantinople, and she was granted some land by Emperor Leo I. This land was infested with a dragon, but she rid the city of this creature, armed with nothing but her faith. She ordered the dragon to come out, stamped onto it, spat on it, and slew it just like that. From then on, Elizabeth became famous and worked many wonders through her life. We now come to the third story. Again, a badass female saint taking no crap from God's enemies. This time, her dragon foe was literally a demon, disguised as a dragon. I am talking of Saint Marina, a 4th century saint martyred during the Diocletianic persecutions like so many others. Marina was imprisoned by the Roman governor of the Diocese of the East, Olybrius, for refusing to renounce her faith and marrying him. During captivity, she defeated 2 demons who wanted to kill her, one in the shape of a dragon. Marina was eventually decapitated after cruel torture, but yes, she single-handedly vanquished 2 demons while in prison. Amazing. The following excerpt was how Marina overcame them both, translated from the Acts of Saint Marina and Saint Christopher by Anthony Caldelas. Quote, "Suddenly, out from the corner, a great dragon emerged, terrible to behold, and its skin varied in color. His hair and beard were like gold. His teeth gleamed and his eyes were like pearls. Fiery flame and a great quantity of smoke issued from his nostrils. His tongue was like blood, and serpents coiled about his neck. The corners of his eyes were like silver, and he stood in the middle of the jail, roaring and hissing. Then he ran in a circle around Marina. He then dragged the holy maiden toward himself and placed his mouth upon her neck, while sending his tongue down, underneath her heels. And in this way, like a stag, he raised her up and swallowed her into his belly. Her hands made the sign of Holy Christ, and as this sign went down ahead of the rest of her, they ruptured the dragon's innards. He fell from the square in a great crash. He was split asunder and died. The holy maiden emerged from his belly without having suffered any harm. Turning around, she said to him, 'Truly, you have found that which you sought.' The dragon lay there, sprawled upon the ground, and suddenly again, from the other corner of the jail, a great demon fell upon Saint Marina's knees. The demon stood up with a howl, took her by the hand, and said to her, 'Be quiet for a little while, Marina. You have said enough. I will reveal great things to you. For I sent my relative Rufus, in the form of a dragon, to kill you. Yet you killed him with your prayers, and now you want to kill me too. But spare me, Marina, and do me no harm.' But Holy Marina sealed her entire body with the sign of the cross, and she grabbed the demon by his hair and beard. He then dragged her toward himself, and they wrestled. The demon said, "Ow, my beard really hurts." Unquote. Despite escaping the assassination attempt of literal demons, Marina could not avoid her fate of death by decapitation on the orders of the pagan governor. Sadly, even after the Christianization of the Roman Empire, these kinds of persecutions persisted, since the emperors now cared about how you conducted worship. The next tale's protagonist is one such emperor who was crazy about persecuting those who disagreed with his theology, but was such a competent ruler and accomplished general that the common folk had to love him and treat him like a hero. If you watched my videos, you should be familiar with him by now. Constantinos V Komnenos. I briefly mentioned Constantinos' dragon-slaying legend in my Historian Dynasty video, but now I'll show you the full story. For repairing the aqueduct of Valens in 766 and saving Constantinople from drought, Constantinos was beloved by his people, and tales of him slaying a foul dragon blocking the water supply began to circulate. A text relating this story is found in a Latin manuscript from 9th century Naples, called the Gesta Episcoporum Neapolitanorum. Understandably, the text is in Latin. Also, it's incomplete because of damage to the folio, and apparently nobody has translated it yet, so I'll just read you my own. Quote, "They say this, that Constantinos was a stronger man, who fought and killed a lion, the most ferocious beast, and set himself against the dragon and destroyed him. For he occupied a certain aqueduct by his size and killed many by his stench. And Constantinos sought no other counsel, and he put himself in danger for everybody, deciding to engage the dragon himself. And he fashioned for himself a lorica falcata, a breastplate which he fortified on every side with very sharp spikes, and to that place where the terrible dragon was resting, he arrived. Not at all hesitating, leaving his companions, he entered into him alone." Unquote. The text breaks off here, but we can see that Constantinos used the same tactic as St. Marina. He entered the dragon and fought him from the inside. Although instead of bursting dragon innards with the holy sign, Constantinos chose to use a fully spiked breastplate. We can assume he succeeded in slaying the dragon, because he reigned for a few more years after 766. For you Latinists out there who are interested in the original Latin text, I've left a link in the description with my other sources. I'd also like to lament again about how much we don't know about those dark ages of the empire during iconoclasm, because our only source of the dragon-slaying tale comes from a Latin ecclesiastical text a century after Constantinos. It is also suspected that the dung-named emperor, who was popular and famous for his impressive military exploits, might have had a whole heroic cycle about him, and this dragon story is but one of the many cool legends the Romans had of this emperor. Oh my god, imagine if this was true. We would have a wealth of Byzantine literature and oral traditions to examine. However, by luck, we do have some surviving stories from the acritic cycle, the popular songs and literature about the Acritae, border guards of the empire from the 8th or 9th to the 11th century. You know that we're going to be looking at an acritic tale next. I have already covered this one in my videos before, in the first East Roman literature episode, about the legendary Digenis Acritas, but we could revisit it with more detail. For those who aren't familiar with Digenis, he was an Acritus with superhuman strength and many awesome exploits on the eastern front of the empire. He had a lovely wife, Evdokia, who was a bit too beautiful for her own good and stirred up the desires of many good-for-nothings, including a dragon. I'll read a primary source on what happened. This is from my translation of Book 7 of the Andros manuscript of Digenis, which I will release in video format once we hit our next subscriber milestone, but you can enjoy this dragon bit right now. Quote, "A dragon changed himself into a beautiful boy, came to her wishing to seduce her, and she recognized who he is. The girl said this quickly to him, 'Let go, beast, of your plan. I am not deceived. My love watches over me, he does not sleep. If he wakes up and finds you, it would be better if you weren't born.' And he jumped up and shamelessly dragged her by his hands. The girl then shrieked, saying to the Acritas, 'Wake up, my lord, you are losing your beauty.' And her great shriek I heard from where she was crying. Quickly I leaped up and found the troublemaker, for the spring was right in front of me, and I drew my sword, finding myself at the spring. For then it seemed to me that my feet had wings. and the dragon revealed to me a huge apparition. 3 enormous heads he had instead of 1. They were all breathing great flames, and from his place he moved, making a noise of thunder as if the earth and the trees all shook. A thick body gathered his heads together. Behind, he had a dreadful tail, very large. When fear and trembling spread over me, he was assaulting me from above with his whole onrush. But I did not fear what I saw. To the top, with God's help, I raised my sword. I leapt upon the beast, severing the head of the terrible and warlike dragon then. He was truly murdered and spread out on the ground, and he flapped his great tail upwards and downwards, whipping the earth violently, and likewise the trees. And I wiped my sword, put it back into the sheath." Unquote. This combat with the 3-headed dragon is but a short episode in this section of Dionys' adventures, but it is one of the most famous, as one of the rare contemporary Byzantine depictions of Dionys we do possess today is a 12th century dish portraying Dionys slaying a dragon. Look at it! How cool is that? The dish drawing is crude, but it attests to how popular the story is for Romans to wish to look at it while they enjoy their dinner. Anyway, for more on Dionys, you can check out my First East Roman Literature video, where I go in depth into his epic. For now, this wraps up our 5 Dragonslayer narratives. I now like to end the video with some light analysis on Byzantine dragon stories as a whole. So, what were the common characteristics of the dragons in these stories in the Eastern Roman Empire? These 5 stories all portray different dragons, but the most basic image is that of the huge serpent, as seen in much of Byzantine art and keeping in with ancient Greek and Roman traditions about dragons. After all, the ancient Greek word for dragon can interchangeably refer to a serpent as well, and this serpentine form of dragons was known all the way back in the ancient Near East, seen in stories like the Hittite myth of Ilyanka. And seriously, look at a dragon from any random culture around the world, and chances are you'll get yourself a long, scaly reptilian creature with sharp teeth. Thus, it should be no surprise that medieval Christian writers considered dragons to just be the largest serpents. And depending on who you ask, this either means dragons are just a natural species, or they are more supernatural. For example, in a treatise on dragons attributed to St John of Damascus, a great 8th century Byzantine theologian, he gives a rather rational analysis of dragons like any other creature, and argues against those who tell tales of dragons shapeshifting and talking with human beings. But these actions, the magical and fantastical, are far more associated with dragons, so the prevalent view in medieval society is that dragons represent the devil, are demons, or generally just agents of the demonic and evil with scary powers. We see this in all the stories we've covered. Every time a dragon appears, it wants to do harm to innocent people, and in the case of Saint Marina, the dragon is literally a disguised demon. And this brings us to what differed the Byzantine dragon from its medieval Christian contemporaries. Byzantine dragons in general seem to be more humanoid, whether it be their ability to shapeshift into humans or understand human speech, or even their lust for women. Of course, what I'm saying is not universal for every single dragon tale in the Eastern Empire. When you have stories like St. George or St Eugenios of Trebizond and Alexios II begs Komnenos to slay a dragon, it's pretty standard stuff. The dragon is just a huge beast, terrifying the people and without complexity to its character. With the story of the aqueduct dragon slain by Constantinos V, it's the same in terms of the dragon being just a menace with no brain that the hero needs to overcome. The way that the hero does so is peculiar. Instead of a direct combat, the hero enters the dragon and kills it from within. Same with Saint Marina, who bursts open the dragon demon from the inside. Now, this method in particular I haven't seen much for contemporary Western European dragons, whose tales mostly favor the head-on fight approach. The Latins recorded Saint Marina's story as well, but one author considers it as, quote, apocryphal and of no historical value, unquote. However, there are many instances of the attack from inside stratagem from classical Greco-Roman myths. Examples include how Heracles slew Akitos to save Etzione, leaping into the monster and hacking its guts for 3 days until it died, or a less famous but more relevant instance for us, of how Menestratos sacrificed himself for his lover Cleostratos, slaying the Thespian dragon by getting himself devoured while donning a fishhook breastplate. The hero perished, but we may see how similar Menistratos and Constantinos' breastplates were. Perhaps the aqueduct dragon story was directly influenced by the Thespian dragon. If so, this will be another case of how the Eastern Romans stubbornly held on to their classical heritage even in their popular traditions. But that's a fun topic for another day. The humanoid qualities of Byzantine dragons are again shown in tales where saints temporarily tamed them. I've covered the story of Hypatios of Gangra, who intimidated the Treasury Dragon to immolate itself. In the bonus tale of St. Elizabeth, the Wonder Worker also was able to order the dragon to face her. It seems that dragons, although ferocious, will cow before very holy people, like human beings. There are more dragon taming stories like this, but we don't have time to cover them all. Another very human fault of these dragons sometimes is that they were creeps. The three-headed dragon tried to seduce Evdokia, and when he failed, he got down to forcing himself onto her before Diogenes slew him. Now, according to the Penguin Book of Dragons, the Byzantine dragon evolved into something like an ogre by the last days of the empire, shown in the late Byzantine romance of Callimachus and Chrysoroi, a nice novel I hope to explore with you for the East Roman literature series in the future. In it, Chrysoroi was trapped in an ogre dragon's, I kid you not, literal sex den before encountering Callimachus. She was also hounded by the dragon for marriage even before the 50 Shades of Grey Byzantine edition happened, so we may see at this point how associated dragons were with lust for beautiful maidens. Apparently, the modern Greek word for dragon is also used to describe a serial rapist, so that's a lasting impression that Byzantine dragons ended up leaving. Now, we may conclude this light discussion with what dragons represent in the stories. I won't go deep into literary symbolism, I promise, although I will link stuff to those of you who are interested. For the hagiographical tales, I believe the dragons represent the evil and the demonic, and every time they are defeated means that the faith triumphed. For the two dragon-slaying emperors, I believe the dragons represent a particular challenge in their reign. For Constantinos V, it's rather obvious that it's the drought of Constantinople in 766, which the emperor overcame by fixing the broken aqueduct of Valens, letting sweet, sweet water flow into the city again. For Alexios II, it's a bit ambiguous, as with cases concerning most Trapezuntine affairs, but my personal opinion is that the story represents him suppressing the Genoese threat to Trebizond. By the 14th century, the Genoese almost had a monopoly over Black Sea trade, had Trebizond acted like the emperor in Constantinople and let himself be pushed around by the Italian merchants. No, Trebizond toughened up and refused to indulge the Genoese traders, whose quarters were indeed located east of the capital city, like the dragon in the story. This led to conflicts between the Romans and Genoese, but Alexios was ultimately victorious and got to keep his conditions for the traders. The Trapezuntine Dragon was blocking the flow of goods into Trebizond, like how the Aqueduct Dragon was blocking the flow of water into Constantinople. So by doubling down on the Genoese, Alexios removed an obstacle for Trebizond's economy and helped his people prosper. These stories are also niche that I couldn't find much sources with more professional interpretations, so I'm afraid my opinions will be all you're getting. Except for the three-headed dragon in Diogenes. A study was written entirely about this episode, and it argues that the dragon symbolizes Diogenes' own guilt, for if you remember from my previous videos, before this event, he raped a girl and felt horrible about it. By slaying the dragon, who would have become a rapist as well if not stopped in time, Diogenes was actually overcoming his own guilt for his previous sin, literally facing his own inner demons. As I said, I won't go too much into detail and examine the language and symbolisms used, so Christopher Livano's paper is linked in the description below in case you want to read more into it. That would be the end of this episode on Eastern Roman dragonslayers in literature. I really enjoyed researching into the stories and traditions of the Romans, and I hope you too like these 5 tales from New Rome. Shh, I know we did more than 5, but the round number is prettier. Which of these was your favorite? Which did you find shocking? Do you know any more stories like this? As always, comments are welcome, so feedback would be appreciated. But anyway, that's it for me. Have a nice day and see you soon with the narrative.